What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another mystery tackle box tips and tricks video. I'm Matt from SBFishingTV, and today we're going to be talking about fishing spoons and blade baits. So the water temperature today is 40.2 degrees. It's pretty cold. It's chilly. Winter is here, and this is actually one of my favorite techniques to throw, not just because it catches a lot of fish, but also because it's a pretty interactive bait, and it's not like you're dragging a jig or a Ned rig just brutally slow along the bottom. You're actually working these baits relatively fast for this time of year, which is something that's a bit of a relief, and it's a lot of fun to throw. Some people aren't a big fan of throwing these, but I personally love throwing spoons and blade baits. So let's take a look at the different baits that we're going to be using today. And in today's video, we're going to get into how to fish them, when to fish them, and what sort of gear and setups you should be throwing them on. So we're going to take a look at two different blade baits today, one being the 𝗙ecie𝗹𝗹𝗶. And what's really interesting about this one is that they eliminated that back hook and they put a small willow leaf blade on there, which is going to add a little bit more flash, a little bit more vibration in the water, and overall it's just a different presentation than just your standard blade bait with two hooks on it. I have caught plenty of fish on this bait. It actually has a smaller profile than other half-ounce blade baits, and it works really well. It doesn't get hung up too often because you have that small treble hook in the front. That's really the only thing you have to worry about getting snagged. Now, on the other hand, we have a Blitz Lures blade bait, and this is definitely more of your typical blade bait. Half ounce, this one's in gold. Normally I'll throw silver or gold, and this one is a little bit different than other brands because some other brands do build their hooks directly into the body of the blade bait, so it makes it really hard or nearly impossible to change hooks, or you need to cut the hooks and then add split rings. This one comes pre-rigged with split rings on there, and you can change those hooks out when they get dull. And the great thing about both of these baits, again, as I was saying earlier, is that it's a pretty interactive bait to be thrown in the winter. They create a ton of vibration in the water, and we'll go over how we're fishing these later, but you're basically just casting it out, letting it sink to the bottom, and then ripping it up off the bottom a foot or two, and then letting it sink right back down and then sitting there. And I fish both spoons and blade baits pretty much the same way. You can fish them vertically, or you can fish them casting and then working them back to the boat. And for the most part, I'm casting them. I'll fish them vertically if I see fish directly under the boat on the graph, but for the most part, I'm casting them around. So spoons come in a variety of different sizes and colors, and there's just like a very wide range of different spoons. There's hundreds of them out there. There's so many different brands and so many different styles. But today we're going to be throwing the Blue Fox 𝗙𝗋cie. And this is a little half-ounce spoon, maybe 2.5 inches long. And again, these come in a variety of different sizes. So one of the biggest spoons that I throw, this is a giant 8-inch Magnum spoon. You can see the difference in size there. It's pretty significant. This thing is maybe a quarter of the size, maybe a sixth of the size. But this is more of a summertime kind of spoon, and I always like to try to match the hatch, especially in the winter. And a lot of the fish, especially in this area that I'm fishing today, or at least the bait fish, are going to be smaller, 2 to 3 inches, and sometimes that smaller size spoon or blade bait really does make all the difference. So if you're not getting bit on a 3-inch blade bait or spoon, try downsizing to like a 2 or 2.5-inch blade bait, and sometimes you really can start catching a lot more fish just by making that small adjustment. But a quick difference between the blade bait and the spoons: these things have a mind of their own. There's really no controlling them. The action on them is insanely wild. If you've never fished one, it's definitely just the craziest looking bait you've seen. So when this thing's falling down, and again, it's half ounce, it's falling pretty quick. It's catching the edge of that spoon and it's making it flutter, and it'll spin and flip, and then it'll dart straight down, and then it'll catch its edge again, and then it'll, like, when you're watching your line going down, you think you're getting bit the first time you throw it. Like, you'll be like, oh, that had to be a fish. It's a really fun thing to throw. The blade bait is not nearly as active as a spoon, but it definitely still has its place. And I actually like throwing the blade bait a little bit more when the water's this cold because it doesn't have that just wild action. And both of these are going to draw reaction strikes from fish, and both of them are, again, pretty active baits. So we're going to tie these on, and we're going to start throwing them around a little bit. We're going to get into how to fish them, where to fish them. Hopefully we can actually catch some fish on it. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about how you work a blade bait. I have this Blitz blade on a 7.3 medium heavy, which is a little bit overkill, but I'm only working with 2 rods today, and I decided to throw the spoon on my spinning rod. I would say the perfect blade bait setup, in my opinion, is like a 7 foot to 7.3 medium spinning rod. I do find that throwing them on a spinning setup is just a little bit easier. It's more manageable, and while you can still catch them on a bait casting setup, I think it's easier to throw on the spinning rod. So I'm casting this bait out, letting it sink all the way to the bottom, and then I'm just literally ripping it up off the bottom until I feel a little bit of vibration and letting it fall right back down. The fun thing about this is when they do bite this bait, you literally just go to rip it off the bottom and your rod just loads up, and it's exciting, it's fun, it's a fun bite. Most of the time you're actually not feeling a bite, it's just you're going to rip that bait up and the fish is on. So normally I'm just giving this blade bait one solid rip up, but there's multiple ways you can fish this. There's really no wrong way to fish it. When you're casting it out, you can give it 2 pops, 1, 2, you can give it 3, you can give it that straight retrieve and then pause, but you always want to make sure that it hits the bottom, because I find that that's normally when the fish are going to eat this thing. So when they see it hop up either right in front of their face or they're kind of slowly swimming behind it, it hits the bottom and they see it as like a moment for them to strike. You can also play around with how long you're going to let it sit on the bottom. So if you give it that rip and you know it hits the bottom, you can count to 3, you can count to 5, and normally I won't wait much longer than 5 seconds. I'm sure there is a time and place for it, but I don't know, I find that they're gonna eat it usually, even with like a 1 second pause, just up and down, up and down. Blade baits and spoons are also more of a deep water presentation. You can throw them in shallower water, but I find that they excel when you're in that 10-foot plus range. I'm also looking around on the graph for any balls of bait. That's like a huge thing for me. It's like I need to be seeing bait to be throwing the blade bait around. Oh, that's stuck. I was talking earlier about matching the hatch. Another thing you should definitely pay attention to, if you can, is try to get an idea of how big the bait is in the area that you're fishing. Because if they're 5 or 6 inches, you can get away with throwing one of the big boy spoons. And normally, I mean, this time of year in the winter, I'm seeing a lot of shad like in that 2 to 3 inch range. So that's where the blade baits come into play. Also, that's another quick tip for you guys. If you get stuck with the blade bait, it actually does come unpinned fairly easily. You just got to get on the other side of it and rip it a couple times, it'll pop out. No love for the blade bait on the first pass. So we're gonna pick this spoon up. Try throwing this around a little bit. I'm working this spoon in the same manner as I was working that blade bait. Just letting it sink to the bottom, flutter down there, do its thing, rest on the bottom, and then just rip it up and let it flutter back down. Okay. Well, there goes our spoon, unfortunately. Comes with the territory of fishing blade baits and spoons, though. You are going to lose some. Dang it. Alright, we're going to try the 𝗙ecie𝗹𝗹𝗶 for a little bit. I didn't get bit on the spoon, and I have not had a single bite on the blitz either, so we're going to try this out. This one's a little bit smaller than both of them, and it has that blade on the back to give it a little bit of extra flash. We'll see if it works. There we go. There we go. This feels like a good fish. Oh, baby. I've been waiting for you. Yes. All right, boys and girls. 5.5 hours later, and we finally found a bass to come up and eat the blade bait. So freaking stoked. It's been a long day. Maybe I can catch a couple more before I have to roll, but just working this thing methodically for the last literally 5.5 hours. Chunky little 1.5 pound Potomac River bass. All right, so before I get out of here, I want to let you guys know a couple of different places that I'm fishing the blade baits and spoons. So Channel ledges are definitely important, especially when the water's this cold. That's where a lot of the bait is going to be congregated, and obviously the fish are going to be down there with them as well, because that water is just the most comfortable for them down there, generally deeper, and that's where I tend to find a ton of my fish in the winter. Another spot I'm looking at are points, any deeper drop-offs or bluff walls with rock. You can also throw these baits around dock pilings or bridges as well, so make sure you check those out. It has been a long and trying day, but we finally got a fish on the blade bait. Keep in mind that sometimes in the winter when you're fishing in 40-degree water, you really do have to work for just one bite. Don't be discouraged when you go out and it's tough. There's still fish to be caught, and sometimes you're gonna go out and be surprised and have really good days. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on Mystery Tackle Box's YouTube channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.